So today I have the honor of introducing Dr. Jenna Beffel Toman. And Jenna is the visiting professor in psychology from Grand Valley State University. You can see her title here, which I'm just very excited about, not only the caregiving experiences, but the sibling perspective, which is something that I know at the center we've talked a lot about across our programs as well as our partners. So Dr. Toman, I'm going to turn it over to you to get started, and thank you for giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you. So, one quick clarifying thing. I don't have the PhD quite yet, although hearing doctor sounds great, but September I defend my dissertation. So not quite there yet, but almost. Um, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for asking to be here today. One quick thing, I have to apologize. I'm gonna guess there's gonna be some barking in the background. I saw a truck drive by. Our neighborhood is a circle, so I'm sure the dog is just waiting for it to circle back now. So in a few minutes, there might be a little bit of background noise, so I want to apologize for that. My name is Jenna Beffel Toman. I'm a doctoral candidate, so almost done with that PhD at Michigan State University in the Human Development and Family Studies Lab. My research lab is the Family Stress Lab, so that's some of the research I'm going to talk about today. And then actually, when I was talking with Dr. Cottrell, I was a visiting professor at Grand Valley. As of 5 days ago, I accepted a new position at a small college called Hope College, which is still in kind of like the West Michigan area. So I'll be moving over there, but at the end of this, I have an email address that you can still use to reach me at despite that switch. So within the Family Stress Lab, most of my work really looks at typically developing siblings of people with disabilities. One of the big pieces that I do is looking at their caregiving experiences, which is what I've been asked to talk about today. And so I'm really excited to share a little bit of kind of what I found, or what we have found, I should say, in the Family Stress Lab over the past 6-7 years or so. So before I jump into kind of some more of like the content in terms of like what we've found, I want to introduce a little bit about just sibling caregiving and caregiving experiences, like some background. So first of all, first thing, language. So typically developing siblings of individuals with disabilities is a mouthful and a lot to say. So I tend to shorten that to TDS. So when you see TDS or you hear me say TDS, I'm referring to those typically developing siblings who have a sibling with a disability. So in general, many TDS do report that they provide care for their sibling at some point in their life, which is why this is an important topic, at least I think, to be studying. So I think typically, though, when we hear about sibling caregiving, we tend to think about it in adulthood. And we tend to think about more of like this formal caregiving where we care for the sibling full time. We'll handle things like physical needs, financial care, health care, etc. Um, well, that's definitely something that goes on. We can also think about less formal care, like providing emotional support, maybe only caring part-time or just helping out here and there, like with transportation when needed. Um, However, the other piece that I think gets overlooked a little bit more often is the idea of caregiving earlier in life. So like in childhood, adolescence, or even emerging adulthood. So many TDS care and provide care throughout the lifespan. And so typically it oftentimes will start with kind of this less formal caregiving role that occurs in childhood. So the work in the Family Stress Lab and the work that I'm going to present today all really focuses on those caregiving experiences that are occurring kind of in childhood, adolescence, and even a little bit of like emerging adulthood. So we're focusing in on kind of that earlier in life caregiving. So caregiving can also be broken down into types, since caregiving includes so many different activities. We find that it's helpful to kind of specify which one that we're talking about. So we're going to talk about 4 different types of caregiving today. The first 2 we're going to talk about are broken down based on kind of like the recipient, like who the caregiving is directed towards. So we have parent-focused and sibling-focused. So parent-focused caregiving is kind of as it sounds, right? It's caregiving that's directed towards the parent, so caring for the parent. It can include a variety of things like making dinner for the parent, comforting the parent when sad, for example. And then the other type is sibling-focused caregiving, and that's going to be caregiving that's directed then towards the sibling. So things like helping the sibling with homework, calming them down when they're upset, babysitting, maybe even when the parent's gone. Other two types of caregiving I'm going to talk about, instrumental and emotional. So these types of caregiving are being broken down more based on the caregiving activity. So like what is actually involved in the caregiving, not necessarily who it's being directed towards. So instrumental caregiving is caregiving that's going to fulfill some sort of physical need. Things like doing the laundry, grocery shopping, a lot of that like kind of cooking, cleaning, those types of things are going to fall under instrumental caregiving. And then our fourth type is emotional caregiving, and that's that caregiving that's going to fulfill some sort of emotional need, whether it's acting as a confidant to a parent or maybe like listening to a sibling vent when they're upset. It's going to fulfill those emotional needs. One thing I want to make clear is that many TDS will engage in more than one of these types of caregiving, and a lot may even engage in all four of these types. So we'll talk about on the next slide why it's still important to break down these different types and specify which ones we're talking about when, especially when conducting research. But for many TDS, they're going to be caring for parent in some way as well as sibling. They're going to be doing both instrumental and emotional. So it's typically a mix of these four different types, not just one or the other. But the reason why it's important to distinguish or kind of break down caregiving types is because prior research shows that there might be different effects on TDS based on the type of caregiving that they're engaging in. So like, for example, this work that I have up here, some findings from Toman and colleagues. So this is some research that was conducted 2017. So it's something that I've kind of built my work on since then. So Toman and colleagues were looking specifically here among TDS with a sibling with ASD or autism spectrum disorder. So it's very specific to that type of disability. I would just want to make that clear. But what they found was that parent-focused caregiving tended to be associated with more negative outcomes for TDS. So they took this group of adult TDS and they asked them, what kind of caregiving did you do when you were younger? If they did a lot of parent-focused caregiving, they tended to in adulthood have more anxiety and more stress. When it came to sibling-focused caregiving, though, it actually was associated with some more positive outcomes. So if they engaged in a lot of that sibling-focused caregiving in childhood, they actually tended to have a better sibling relationship in adulthood. So the thought here is that some types of caregiving may be more developmentally appropriate and also kind of less taxing than others. So like, for example, and it definitely can vary by culture, but at least here in the US for the most part, it's a lot more common for siblings to care for other siblings rather than parents. Even if it's just in small ways, like babysitting when the parent is gone for a little while or helping with homework. And this also tends to be a little bit more developmentally appropriate too, right? Caring for someone who's not as far along as you developmentally, or someone who's younger than you, or at least close to your age. This is even kind of a part of a normal learning process of learning things like responsibility, empathy, pro-social behavior, etc. However, when it comes to caring for parents, this tends to be a little bit less common. Typically, we think of parents as being the ones who are supposed to care for the child, not the other way around. And this kind of caregiving tends to be a little bit less developmentally appropriate because parents are further along in their development. And so we tend to think that it should be the parent then that's teaching the child and caring for the child rather than the child doing it for the parent. And so we tend to think then because of that, maybe caring for parents might be a little bit more taxing, a little bit more burdensome for a child than caring for a sibling. And that's one of the reasons why we think then parent-focused caregiving might have some more of these negative effects than sibling-focused. So for the majority of what I'm going to present in today's presentation is going to be work that's specifically come out of the Family Stress Lab at Michigan State. The work here is going to mainly focus on TDS, specifically of people or who have siblings specifically with autism. There is one study that we're going to cover that's a bit broader. So it's TDS of siblings with any disability. So whether it's autism, Down syndrome, an intellectual disability, physical disability, all of those fit under there. And I'll make sure to point that out when we get there. But the majority of the work is focusing more specifically on autism. So you'll see that within the lab and with what I'm going to share today, that we're really exploring TDS's caregiving experiences and then the kinds of outcomes that are associated with these experiences. We're going to break it down by caregiving type. So typically we try to break it down by type. And then also I add this additional piece of looking at other factors. So we'll talk about those, but how they might also play a role in caregiving experiences and how caregiving experiences influence TDS's outcomes. So basically what I'm talking about here is just that no two TDS are going to have the exact same experience when caregiving. Even if they're both caring for a younger sibling with autism, for example, there's still going to be so many other factors that are involved in that caregiving experience that are going to play a role in, how stressed the TDS feels or how supported they feel, for example. Some TDS may get more help when caregiving than others, like their parents may be more involved, some maybe not so much. Some might think their caregiving role is a fair arrangement, while others may think it's really unfair. And so all of these different little factors are also going to play a role in how that caregiving experience influences TDS in the future. It's like one example I like to give is because I think most people have interacted in some way with a teacher, right? And as much as we like to try to think that our jobs don't influence us outside of work or outside in our personal life, they really do, right? And so we can think about this example with, like, let's say we know two second grade teachers. Well, they might both teach second grade, but how their job influences them outside of work is going to depend on whether or not they like their boss or their principal, how many kids they have in the classroom, if the kids are good listeners, if they're able to regulate themselves well when they're upset or feeling emotional, right? So all of these other factors that are going on within the classroom or even within the school are going to influence how stressed they are at the end of the day, how much anxiety they have at the end of the day, etc. So it's the same kind of idea here of that it's not just the caregiving that influences TDS's outcomes, but also these other factors that play a role too. And so I want to take things kind of one step further in my work and make sure that I'm also looking at these other factors and that I'm also acknowledging that they're there and seeing kind of how they might play a role too. So you'll see that there's that piece in all the different research that we'll go over today too. So that's kind of just the quick brief background that I wanted to go over. For the rest of the presentation, I'm going to spend the time walking through some kind of key findings regarding TDS caregiving experiences that we've found in the Family Stress Lab. So we're going to break them down and go through them by caregiving type. And then you'll notice for each one, there's also kind of these other factors that I'm exploring as well and that we'll go over. And then at the very end, I'm going to present just quickly one resource that we have for TDS, especially who maybe are feeling overwhelmed or in that caregiving role. So any questions? I guess I should stop here before we kind of dive into the research. All right, then the first kind of key findings, I want to focus in on parent-focused caregiving. So remember, that's caregiving directed towards the parents. And I want to make a note here that all these findings on this slide are from TDS of individuals with autism spectrum disorder. So we're specific to that disability for these findings. So first kind of key finding, we found that parent-focused caregiving seems to be associated with less intentions to care for a sibling with autism in the future. So essentially, this study was looking at how caregiving for parents during childhood may influence TDS's intentions or willingness to care for their sibling with autism in the future. Like, for example, when they're both adults and maybe the parents can no longer provide that care for the sibling. So essentially, the TDS in this study they were about college age, so emerging adults. So we're asking, what were your experiences like in childhood? Did you do a lot of caring for your parents or not? And then we asked, what's your plan for the future? Are you planning to care for your sibling? How willing are you to care for them? And then we tried to see, does that caring for a parent kind of predict how willing they are to care for a sibling in the future? So what we found was that when TDS cared more for that parent during childhood, they were less willing to then care for their sibling in the future. So specifically, we found that when TDS do a lot of caring for parents during childhood, they tend to perceive this caregiving role as being pretty unfair. And so then this kind of leads them to be then less willing to take on any additional caregiving roles in the future, like in this case, caring for their sibling. Second kind of key finding we have with parent-focused caregiving is that support from parents seems to be really important for TDS's general well-being when they're providing this care for the parent. So again, this is emerging adult TDS, so we're asking them about kind of their past experiences with caregiving, and then looking at kind of some outcomes. In this case, we're looking at well-being during emerging adulthood. In terms of support, so here specifically what we measured was actually, it's kind of a mouthful, but it's TDS's disclosure, so just sharing their worries about their sibling with autism to their parents. So essentially, we're looking at how often TDS would go to their parents to talk about their worries about their sibling, whether it's about their sibling's future, their social life, their schooling, whatever it is, just any sort of worries. How often do they basically go seek support from their parents by initiating these conversations? So this was our way of kind of looking at how often TDS go to their parents for support. So if you recall from earlier, parent-focused caregiving does tend to be associated with some more negative outcomes for TDS. Like we said, we think this is because it is a little bit less developmentally appropriate and therefore maybe a little bit more taxing. But our findings here showed that support from parents, so that disclosure and getting that support from parents, may actually act as sort of a buffer against some of these negative outcomes. So specifically, we found that as long as TDS were disclosing often or seeking support from their parents often, then parent-focused caregiving actually didn't really negatively impact their well-being. However, if TDS were engaging in a lot of this caring for the parents and didn't disclose often or didn't seek that support often, then they did experience more of that well-being. So what this finding we're thinking may indicate is that even though parent-focused caregiving has the potential to negatively impact TDS, as long as parents are reciprocating the support while the TDS is caregiving. So as long as if the TDS is doing a lot of caring for that parent is still there to support them and listen to them when they need to talk about their worries, then parent-focused caregiving actually may not have as much of a negative impact on TDS. So we're going to summarize. I have a slide towards the end where I'll summarize kind of the practical implications of some of these findings again. But real quick to talk about it just briefly here. Kind of one of the main kind of key takeaways from this then is that maybe encouraging disclosure and that support within families is really important then when we know that TDS are doing a lot of that parent-focused caregiving. Right, so next I want to go into talking about kind of the key finding we have with sibling-focused caregiving. So this is still with that same sample of TDS specific to autism. And what we found here was that identifying benefits related to having a sibling with autism seemed to be important for TDS's pro-social, or what we can call kind of just helping behavior, if they're caring for that sibling, if they're doing a lot of that sibling-focused caregiving. So to explain this finding, this is from a paper where we were exploring TDS's pro-social behavior. So pro-social behavior is essentially just general helping behavior. It would include things like sharing, volunteering, even giving someone a compliment. And so we were interested in if sibling-focused caregiving, since caregiving also involves this component of helping, right? We were interested if it would influence TDS's general helping tendencies or this kind of general pro-social behavior. Other piece of this study then is that it included what we call ASD benefit finding. So ASD benefit finding is this idea that TDS find benefits or positives to having a sibling with autism. Like they acknowledge that it can be challenging and stressful in its own way, but they can also recognize that there's some benefits and there's some positives to this experience as well. So TDS who tend to be very good at benefit finding are TDS who endorse sayings like, having a sibling with autism has shown me that all people need to be loved. or has taught me more about the unique needs of all people. So that's what we mean by kind of that ASD benefit finding, like almost looking on the bright side and being able to find the positives, even in a situation that might be challenging. And so what we found was that if TDS didn't perceive many benefits to having a sibling with autism, like if they weren't very good at picking out those positives, then engaging in a lot of that sibling focused caregiving was linked with lower levels of prosocial behavior. So they're engaging in that sibling focused caregiving. They're not seeing a lot of benefits to having a sibling with a disability, or specifically autism, I should say. Then they showed lower levels of that kind of general helping. So our thought on this finding is that maybe if TDS are spending a lot of time caring for and helping their sibling, then maybe they might experience some sort of kind of caregiving or helping burnout. And so they don't have much bandwidth left to then help others by engaging in prosocial behavior, because they've given pretty much all they have to give to that sibling. And so they physically don't have enough energy or the capacity to then do care, provide help, I should say, outside of the family. However, maybe it's if they can see these benefits, though, of like they're good at identifying the positives to having a sibling with autism, then maybe this can kind of help protect from burnout. So maybe we're not exactly sure why, but maybe it helps them stay more motivated, or it gives them maybe a sense of purpose in their caregiving role. And having that motivation, that sense of purpose, maybe helps them have a little bit more bandwidth. So then they have a little bit more left over to then engage in kind of more of those general helping behaviors that are outside of the family or outside of that sibling relationship. So kind of the main key takeaway, a key summary here is that it may be important then really to support TDS in helping them identify benefits related to having a sibling with autism if we know that they're engaging, especially in this kind of sibling caregiving. I'll stop here before we get into the other two for questions, kind of like a halfway. So we've done two, and then we'll do the two other types. And then we'll also have time at the end too, so. Okay, so then let's talk about some key emotional caregiving findings. So remember, emotional caregiving has to do with fulfilling emotional needs, like providing comfort when someone's upset, being there for someone to vent to. And then these findings with emotional, and then we'll talk about instrumental on the next slide. These are the findings that I mentioned earlier that are broader. So they're TDS of individuals of a variety of disabilities. So we're no longer specific to ASD here. So what we found was that emotional focused caregiving experiences did tend to influence TDS's career aspirations. So here we were looking at career aspirations. Specifically, when TDS engaged in a lot of that emotional focused caregiving, they were also really likely to be interested in a career where they would work with people with disabilities. So these are TDS that were college students. And so kind of like in previous studies, we asked them, what were your experiences of caregiving in childhood? And then we also asked, what's your major and what career are you intending to go into at this point? So that's why it's career aspirations. They weren't necessarily in the career field yet, but we're asking about what they were intending to do. So this finding basically showed us that if TDS had done a lot of emotional caregiving for their family during childhood, they were more interested in pursuing a career that would involve working with people with disabilities. So that could be something like a special education teacher, a therapist, even like a researcher who does research with people with disabilities, but just some sort of career where they would be working with people with disabilities. So the thought here behind this finding is that maybe this increased experience in caring for the emotional needs of people with disabilities or family members, right, like parents of people with disabilities, then helps TDS to become really attuned to the unique emotional needs and experiences of people with disabilities, but just of all people too. And so because of this, this might set them up to be really successful in a job where they'll be working closely with people with disabilities. So although emotional caregiving can be really mentally and emotionally taxing, this finding here is showing us that TDS are being really resilient. So despite the fact that this experience giving emotional care might have been a little bit taxing or burdensome even, TDS are still building upon the strengths and the skills that they learned through this experience, and they're using them to their advantage. Like in this case, they're intending to go into these careers where they can use the skills and they can use the knowledge and the strengths that they built in these caregiving experiences. Okay, and then our last kind of slide on some key findings, instrumental caregiving. So remember, instrumental then is fulfilling those physical needs. So like housework, chores, those sorts of things. Here right now, we don't have any major key findings yet, but I do want to point out that I've only done one study looking at the instrumental caregiving. So this is just one study. And so by no means does that mean it's not important. There's just more work that needs to be done. However, we have this kind of tangent, smaller finding, giving some evidence to support that maybe in certain circumstances, instrumental caregiving may actually deter TDS from caring or from wanting to go into a career where they would work with people with disabilities. So this wasn't a main finding. And actually what we did here is we broke TDS into groups. So we asked them again, what were your experiences caring for or providing emotional care for the family in childhood? And then we focused in specifically on a group of TDS who reported that they gave little to no emotional care. So this finding is specific to just that group. So within that group that didn't do much, if any, emotional caregiving, we found that they were more likely to want to work with people with disabilities when then they also didn't engage in much instrumental caregiving. So if they didn't do a lot of emotional caregiving, they're most likely to want this type of career when then they also weren't doing much instrumental. So they weren't doing much of either types of caregiving. We are not really sure why this is, so we definitely need some follow-up research. At this point, just based on what we saw in our data and theory and existing research, our best guess is that maybe it's that emotional caregiving piece that's really pushing TDS to want to work with people with disabilities. And so if that piece isn't present, like it wasn't in this group, then maybe other caregiving activities like instrumental caregiving activities are solely kind of just taxing or causing some sort of caregiving burden, which then leads TDS to kind of steer away from working with people with disabilities because perhaps they no longer feel they have the bandwidth or the capacity to do so, you know, in their future career as well. So that's our kind of best guess there. But like I said, more research is needed to kind of figure out why we're seeing that. So like I had kind of hinted at before or alluded to, I did want to make sure to put in at least one slide here where we kind of review the big findings and their applicability or how these findings might relate then to practice. So there's kind of three big ways that I at least see these different findings that we talked to might relate to practice. So the first is just knowing that disclosure seems to be really important when we have that parent-focused caregiving going on. So if we're working with families with TDS in some way, and we know that TDS are engaging in a lot of caregiving for parents, it might be really important for us to try to encourage frequent disclosure between TDS and parents or frequent support between the TDS and parents. So that way we know that TDS are getting that social support because as we saw in the findings, that support did protect against some of the more negative outcomes that were associated with parent-focused caregiving. Next big kind of practical implication was this idea of ASD benefit finding, right? So identifying benefits to having a sibling with autism might be something that's really important for TDS to be engaging in when they're doing this sibling-focused caregiving. So when we know that TDS are engaging in sibling-focused caregiving, we then might want to encourage or try to help them practice identifying benefits related to having a sibling with autism, because as we saw from the research, this was important for pro-social behavior development. I didn't get super into it on the, when we talked about it originally, but pro-social behavior development is super important. As a society, we value pro-social behavior because we like people who are helpful, and that's kind of how society runs. We have to help each other out. Prosocial behavior is also linked to things like better social relationships, more academic success. So we really want to be sure that, I mean, no kids, but also in this case, we're talking specifically about TDS, that none of them are developing these lower levels of prosocial behavior. And it seems like we can help make sure, at least one way that we might help make sure that that doesn't happen is by encouraging TDS to kind of look at and identify some of those benefits. And then lastly, a really big one is that a lot of this work is just really showing how resilient TDS are. So even though in some cases these caregiving roles that they're in can be very burdensome or stressful or taxing, TDS are using these skills that they learn in these roles to their advantage. So like specifically in the study that we talked about last, we saw that they're using these skills in their careers, right? They're taking what they've learned in these experiences in childhood and they're using them in the future in their careers. That way they can be successful there. That was all I wanted to talk about specifically for research. So I'll pause here again for questions before I present just quick on one support that we have for TDS.
Jenna, real quick question, and you may not have looked at this yet in your research,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking of parental modeling and kind of the sibling research in general. Do you see any differences in what you found maybe by birth order? You know, this
Yes,
is an older sibling versus a younger sibling.
yes, that is a really good question. So in my work, we do collect data on that. We haven't looked at it, but the reason we collect data on it is because prior work has shown that that is important. Yeah. So I don't have specific information off the top of my head about birth order, other than it does tend to be more common for like the oldest sibling to provide the most care. But I don't have off the top of my head if birth order influences these outcomes. But that's a really great question. And like I said, it's something we've collected data on because it's something that, I would like to look at in the future because I know that it seems to be important.
Yeah,
So
that would be phenomenal. And I know that, in terms of the caregiver, the parent support too, there's that father-daughter,
yeah.
mother-son kind of aspect to see if that pro-social, that support is heavier. So this is really cool.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of data in these two studies that we haven't dug into yet, but we've got all that information that I'd like to too. Like based on, I know it sometimes gender plays a role too, and who's caring for who, and then looking at dyads, like you said, like mother, father, or sorry, like son, mother, son, father, those kinds of things too, in that support and kind of seeing, if certain dyads have more of an influence than others. So yeah, these are all really great questions and things that are definitely like in my lineup of things to explore in the future. Yeah.
Your whole
Great
career.
question. Yes, exactly.
You
Great
have a
question.
question in the chat, and then Eric also raised his hand, whichever one you want to go to.
I just opened the chat. So to assist families, I often encourage parents to set aside time for engaging with their TDS children separate from their child with disability. Is this an information that would promote those positive outcomes? Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to be really careful because I'm not going to say yes because I don't have the research data on that. But based on what I have found and what I've seen in the literature, I would guess that yes, it would promote more of those positive outcomes because it gives, the TDS and the parent a time to kind of debrief with each other, grow their relationship, and then get that support from one another. So that's a great question. Like I said, I can't like give an exact answer because I would want there to be data on it before I would give, a yes or no. But I would think that that would be a very good thing for those families. At the very least for TDS to feel like they have that secure time with their parent. Because I know sometimes one thing that they report is just that they feel like they kind of come second to their sibling. And so, in terms of just feeling like they get to be seen and heard by their parent, I would think that would be something that they would really value. Yeah. So great question. And then did you say a hand up as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a question for you. So I do psychotherapy, and I'm just wondering, how do you articulate these ideas and share this content with families in a way that they can truly absorb that. Like, because I mean, there's some
Yeah.
terms in this that are like, I know what you're talking about. I think we all know what you're talking about. But for me, I'm in the ground rounds. One thing I like to get out of this is this information is useful. And I know I need to be able to articulate this to parents. So, what would be a way that you would suggest that I share this in a way that could be helpful?
Yes, that's a fantastic question because that is something that I deal with a lot. Like translating research to practice is difficult. But there's things that I want parents to know. And so I'm still not even at a place where I have a great answer for you with that. I've done some like working with Michigan State, they call it like extensions, where I've put on like parenting type like classes that are for parents, but especially in this case, like some of these topics can be touchy subjects as well. And so it is really tough. And so I think just trying to break down to like the lowest, or not the lowest, but like the biggest is what I should say, idea, like here of like, even though there's so many other little nuances that went into these findings, like just break it down to like, we know that talking with your child and letting them come to you for support is important. So I know that's not a great answer to your question. Because like I said, it's something that I'm still, especially like new career, um, trying to make it as accessible as possible. But so far I found just trying to get like find the main idea. And then working with other professionals has been really, really helpful too. Like, bringing different brains together of people who work more with like parents versus people who work more in like the medical side, the research side, and all kind of coming together to bounce ideas off of like what's going to be the best way to do this. And so in the past, like I said, I've done like a parenting class. I've also made just like a brief brochure and things like that. But yeah, I don't have a fantastic way to do this yet. And I think it's something that the field in general really struggles with. There's this huge gap between this research that's going to be really helpful and actually getting it into the hands of people who are going to be able to use it. But that is the goal of all my research, is for it to be used. So, um, looking for ways to better do that is definitely something that I'm looking into. Um, One take home point I see is that they should feel comfortable talking. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Talking
I
about
have a
their.
sibling. No, I was just gonna say I have a sibling.
Mhm.
And I believe that my nephew is dealing with some challenges, and I believe that his dad is having some true difficulty communicating about it, and so is his sibling. And I was just wondering, I mean, I try not to be the family therapist, you know what I mean? But
Right.
there's some terms that I could utilize that I don't have in my little repertoire of things that would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can talk more too. And you can also send me an email so I can think on it a little bit more.
I got
Um,
you.
but yeah, I agree that honestly, I would think, especially when it comes to like the disclosure and the talking part, therapy probably is really important, but you can't make people go to therapy who don't want to go to therapy. So,
No, you
uh,
cannot.
so like in that case, like, that's, I think something I struggle with too. So
Yeah,
if they're not open to talking about it, then I don't know. I think that's also a good next step of like
yeah,
how we encourage people
yeah,
to open up. And part of
yeah,
me thinks it might be something that has to start when children are really young.
yeah.
Um, but then that doesn't get past the parents not wanting to open up problem. So um,
Jenna,
I'm
what
just,
I usually, I'll just share this with you. One of the things I do, I start off everything with strength based.
yes,
Tell me the good about this person. Tell me the
yeah,
things that are interesting about this person. What are the things about? So I never use the words different,
hmm
strength, interesting, and challenging. And then the conversation is based on something that's a little different, and you can dive into those harder topics.
yeah, I love that idea. That's kind of what I was trying to get at with the
Yeah,
benefit finding of
no
like,
doubt. That's
let's,
one of the things I mean that Leslie we do here is a kind of a strength-based practice with
yeah.
all the clinicians. So, but I really do appreciate your information here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I love the strength base. That is kind of the goal of my research that I'm doing, is like looking at pro-social behaviors, benefit finding. So I'm really, really happy to hear that. Yeah. Um, any other questions right now? Well, we should have more time at the end too. I just have a couple quick slides left. All right, so let's go through these couple of quick slides then, because I wanted to bring to everyone's attention at least one support for TDS. So again, I want to emphasize that every TDS's caregiving experience is going to be different. However, one thing that most TDS seem to have in common is that the overwhelming majority express that they could use more support, just in general, but also in caregiving as well. So I'm going to share just one support today. There's many out there. But this one that we're going to talk about mainly focuses on like social support, and it's not necessarily specific to just caregiving. It includes that, but also kind of all potential challenges that TDS might experience. If it wants to move, maybe. All right, so the one I want to talk about is called the Sibling Support Project. It's this national program that's really dedicated to supporting siblings of people with disabilities. So I have the link here. I'll copy and paste that into the chat actually right now, if it'll let me. Here we go. Maybe not. I'll do it at the end. But this is a screenshot. Oh, wait, I think I can get it here. Sorry, there we go. Great. Okay. So you'll see this is a screenshot of their homepage, and you can see just by the tabs up at the top that there's a ton of different things that they do. So like they'll host events like conventions for families. That resource tab has so many great resources. It ranges from things like books and videos designed for TDS and their families to resources for planning for future caregiving, links to recent research. They even run a podcast about TDS experiences and TDS resources. So there's a ton of great stuff under that one. And then the one I wanted to focus in just a little bit more on is you'll see, I think it's, yeah, the third tab there, which is SIB shops. So SIB shops are support groups basically for school age TDS. So they split them up. I believe it's like 4 or 5 to about age 11 and then 11 to about 18. So there are these support groups that are offered both online and in person. They're offered in either every state or almost every state, as well as a variety of other countries outside of the US. And they're really this place where TDS can come together and they can connect with people who truly understand their experiences. They can share about the good, they can share about the bad. They'll do fun things like play games. They'll also do learning, like about resources, about their sibling's disability or services for their sibling. So it's a really great resource because they do so many of these different things. Like it's for social support, but it's also fun and there's also learning involved. And the reason why I really like this one is because it's pretty accessible with it being located in so many different places. And then on top of that, having that online piece, it makes it pretty accessible for almost all TDS who want to participate. So SIB shops is one of kind of the bigger ones that I know of in terms of support groups for siblings. So that was all that I had. I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for like question and discussion. So thank you all for being here. My contact info is down at the bottom there. So if you have a question you don't want to ask in front of everyone or you come up with something later, you can send me an email. But unless there's anything else that you all have planned, I'm open for the last about 15 minutes for just questions and discussion. So here's those references too, I'll throw up there as well. But that's all I have. And so questions, discussion, I'm open to all of that for the remainder of the time then.
So Tina, I saw you had listed our Paths for Parents and Family to Family program, and Tina is our manager for that, offers SIB shops. Tina, do you mind sharing some just your experience from providing those?
Well, we're actually still kind of getting them up and going. We've had about 2 successful ones since I'm gonna say like December. We offer them once a month. We are doing them online. Courtney and I think we even got Patrice trained as a facilitator for the SIB shops. And we have Also, just recently, this month started to include, no, last month, I'm sorry, SIB teen. So our SIB shop for the younger ones are for like ages, I think we're doing 8 to 12, and those are the ones Courtney does. And then I do the SIB teen, so I take the 13 to 17-year-olds. Right now, like I say, we're still, trying to get it out there. We haven't really had enough people register to do a SIB teen yet, but we have done a couple of the SIB shops with the younger kids. And those have been, pretty good. The kids that have came have really enjoyed it, getting to connect with other siblings that have a sib with a disability. So it's been really great, and we're looking to, continue to try to grow that and to reach more kiddos that are siblings. So
Nice.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That reminded me that because I had someone recently reach out to me about spreading the word about SIB shops too, is I think one problem is just getting the word out there that they exist. So I think anyone attending right now, if you have a way that you think that you could share this information with families, I think it seems to me like from what I've learned that that's kind of what they're needing some help with at this point, is just getting the kids to know that it exists so that way they can have enough people um, present at those meetings. Yeah,
yeah,
Sharon.
go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just agreeing with you.
Oh no, you're fine. We have a hand up. I was gonna say, Sharon, you're free to go.
Hello, just have a question for you. Have you, has your research expanded to siblings who it's had a negative effect on them being a sibling of an individual with a disability?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of the work, we look at like some positives and negatives to kind of fully understand the full experience of like what are some of the negative things, but then also what are some of the positive. Because I think to have like a well-rounded way to support people, you need to know strengths and challenges.
I just have a situation with a family. They adopted both children, and with the girl being adopted first, and then her younger brother was adopted later, and he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So he had very high intense needs.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they grew up together. When he passed away, then she told her parents that they were never there for her, they were only there for him. And she's totally cut herself off from the family, and has
Yeah.
even had two children, and they're not allowed to see those children. It's just a tragic situation, kind of extreme. And I just wondered if you had experienced any of that, heard of any of those types of stories, that it was that extreme of a situation with a sibling.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it is super sad when something like that happens, but like we said, everyone's experience is so different. And so, for some people, it, it, yeah, I guess I'm trying to say that yes, for some people it might be a lot worse and affect them in different ways, and they might have a different opinion on it too. Because one thing that I look at also is kind of like our perception. Like some siblings might perceive like, okay, this is just what my family is. My role is to help caregive, and that's kind of, it is what it is. My family needs the help. Others might see it as, well, it's not really fair that I have to give all this care, and on other families we don't, and like I should be getting more of the care just like my sibling is. And so part of the reason why the research is so hard is because there's so many different variations. But yeah, like I know people who are like even just personally that are happy and planning to take care of their sibling in the future and have a great relationship with their family. And then I know others who, yeah, are pretty bitter and upset about it. So I think part of the reason I do the research is trying to understand all these different experiences and how they're linked with different outcomes. That way, if we have a better idea, we can better maybe like intervene with families earlier on to give them the support that they need. So that way, those kinds of like families even falling apart, like you said, doesn't happen in the future. That way, people feel like they get what they need. Um, as much as possible. Yeah. Yeah, so great question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any others at this point? Or just like discussion? I mean, I by no means know everything, so if other people have like things to share that this brought up, like I'm happy to learn more about other pieces as well. Don't see anything in the chat.
Do you, real quick, in terms of the SIB teens, so I know a lot of your work was on parental influences for this.
Mhm.
teen. Do you see non-parental influences? So for people facilitating these types of supports, obviously, I mean, there seems to be,
Yeah.
they could have similar pro-social effects.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that yet, but that is definitely something that I would think would be important. Like if you were having someone else who's a mentor who you also go to talk about these sorts of things. I could see that definitely being also an effect as well. I do know someone who I think was, I might be speaking wrong, but I think she was trying to collect data on some of the SIB shop stuff to look at some stuff like that. I want to say that was around COVID time, or maybe they didn't have enough people, so I don't know that that worked out, but that's definitely something that me and others are interested in learning about. And I think also just in general trying to see the effects of SIB shops, because like I would assume they have great outcomes, a great influence, but in terms of like funding and convincing people to attend, if you have a lot of concrete data to show, look, it does have these great effects, that's obviously going to be better. So I don't know if Tina knows more about that than me, because I'm not actually physically involved in the SIB shops. It's just something that I'm familiar with, and I've gone to some of their like webinars, but I don't do anything on like the back end of it.
Gotcha. Well, this is all really fascinating, and you've already done a lot in your early career, and it'll be really interesting to watch what other questions you answer with your work and in these studies and others. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you. And I know I don't have a ton of concrete answers for anybody, but I'm sure as you all probably know, working with families, that everything is, there's a lot of nuances, right? And a lot of differences. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to figure out more of these. And really just the goal is to figure out how to best support families. So thank you all for listening to at least the research that we do have. And yes, I'm hoping to get more and more out throughout the rest of my career. So
That would be great. It'll be important.
thank you. Yeah.